Today on Locked On Red Wings, should Detroit trade for JJ Peterka?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty's the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a sports writer for C&G newspapers, while I am a color commentator for Oakland University ACHA D1 men's hockey. They got another recruit this past week. Scotty, brother of Vinny Anderson, is coming to the team, coming from the NOJHL in Canada. No one cares about ACHA news, but Oakland has had a incredible...
Oh, that's cool, though.
They've had an incredible recruiting run this year. They're going to, for the first time since pre-COVID, probably have more than a full roster. So COVID really screwed them up, but the new head coach has them on the right track. I'm really excited for the new school year. It feels like every week they're announcing new recruits. But anyways, enough of that. Scotty, we have a fun episode for the people. There were reports last week that Buffalo Sabres players were not very happy with the direction of the team, which comes as no surprise if anyone's ever followed the Buffalo Sabres for more than 3 years. They seem to cycle through their core pretty consistently. I would imagine that the trade from Dylan Cousins made a lot of Sabres fans not too happy with the direction of the team, as they put, and now it's sounding like a couple players are going to be on the block. Obviously, already we knew of Bowen Byram, who was not pleased with his role on the team, which makes sense, right? He's a good offensive defenseman who's kind of blocked by Owen Power and Rasmus Dahlin, looking for a better role. Well, then the name JJ Peterka came up, and it's what a lot of Red Wings land has been talking about over the weekend, and now we're going to have our turn at talking about JJ Peterka as well. Scotty, before we get to that, though, I got to let the people know that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Scotty, JJ Peterka, 23 years old. Yeah, he is a restricted free agent this season. He is a left wing, and he's coming off a career-high 68-point season in 77 games played, 27 goals, 41 assists. Should the Detroit Red Wings trade for JJ Peterka?
You know, I think that this is one of the more fascinating conversations we'll have, just because it is a trade, and a lot of the conversation we've had so far have been free agents. But even in the trade, market and in the trade landscape, like a lot of it is not very often that a player of this age and caliber is put on the trade market, right? So like he's going to cost you a pretty penny. Like he's going to have a pretty high price tag, and usually when you see people traded in the offseason, it's, it's there's a couple of years left on their contract, or 1 year left on their contract, or, maybe their production has fallen off, or et cetera, et cetera. This is just Buffalo being Buffalo. Like, this is just, you know what I mean? Like, this has nothing to do with his performance. It has nothing to do with, his current contract. He's not getting paid really anything at the present moment. Like,
ELC.
Right. Like, this is just strictly Buffalo not being able to, retain players like they kind of always have. And so, I don't know, man. Like, this is a really interesting one, just because it's going to be a lot of assets you're going to have to give up to bring him in, but you're also not getting a guy for just a year or two. You're getting him, and I mean, heck, you bring him in and then extend him, I would imagine would be most teams' game plan here on paper. You bring him in, you extend him, you have him for the next 7 or 8 years, and that's really enticing. So I think kind of a stereotypical answer, but like if the price is right, I don't know why it wouldn't be something that most teams would want to do.
Right, and let's start with those contract projections, which you just alluded to, Scotty. He is projected, according to Evolving Hockey, to get anywhere between a 2-year, $5 million deal, a 3-year, $5.6 million deal, or a 6-year, $6.8 million deal. That's obviously per season for each of those. That is what Evolving Hockey predicts. I feel, and this is kind of in the trend all offseason, maybe Evolving Hockey, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Evolving Hockey has a history of being very close to being spot on with these contract projections, but I'm wondering if maybe the salary cap rising is, maybe they're not taking that into account, because I feel like every single time we talk about a contract projection, I feel like my anticipation for contracts is higher than what they're listing it as, because I don't know why you would give him a 2-year $5 million deal or a 3-year 5.6, because then you just delay paying him big money. And obviously the upside to that is if he does blossom in a few years, he'll be 26, still an RFA, at 25, still an RFA, and you can lock him up until his prime is basically ending. That's the upside to that. What? I'm sorry?
I said, but it'll cost more.
It'll cost more, yes, if he does.
Right.
Which is why we're seeing a lot of teams nowadays lock up these young players that they think are going to be stars now. And I do think Peterka has a long enough of a track record of showing year-over-year improvements to take the gamble on the 7 or the 8-year deal. And a 7 and 8-year deal projections are 7 years, 6.9, or 8 years at 8.1. And if you go by that 7-year deal at 6.9, I think that'd be an absolute steal. Again, this is just a projection. Who knows if he actually signs that deal? He might ask for more, but you look at the progress of his ELC, right, Scotty? In his first year, he had 32 points in 77 games. Pretty good rookie season. Second year, 50 points in 82 games. 18 points better. Sorry, I'm not good at math. And then this past season, in 77 games, fewer games than his sophomore year, he scored 68 points with 41 assists on a Buffalo Sabres team that is a offense-first team for sure. They have always struggled defensively. But he is a guy who I would be comfortable giving a 7-year, 8-year deal at a reasonable number, especially with the cap rising, taking that gamble on, because this team needs a top 6 left winger, and that is exactly what he is. And he's a good playmaker, too. He's proven that. I think he has enough of a track record to take that gamble on. He's a very talented player. He's another guy who is going to serve on your power play, probably power play 2, unless Patrick Kane doesn't return, and then a slot opens up on PP1, but this is a guy that brings top 6 scoring oomph, and you can lock up long-term and not have to worry about, because that's the thing, too, is a lot of the conversations we've been having about these young guys, Scotty, or not these young guys, but these UFAs, is that how many years of these contracts will they be in their prime before you start having to just eat the money, right? Well, this is a guy, if you trade for an RFA, and obviously there's the trade aspect where you'll be giving up things, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later, what you could possibly give up, but you're getting a guy who's going to possibly get better over the next course of a few years and then have his prime here. It would just add to your core. I mean, there's a lot of pros to bringing in a guy like this. He fills a need, and he helps improve your scoring.
Yeah, I think the point you made at the end there is probably my favorite one, where like he is adding to the core. Like he's 23, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like you are quite literally adding to the core you have.
Right. And there are a list of downsides to him too. And if you've listened to us talk about free agents or trades, you know that's coming here in segment 2. And then we'll talk about possible cost it would take to acquire him and if that's worth it. So stay tuned to segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game better before tip-off and live. With live player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. New to FanDuel, it's a perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If that $5 bet wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. All right, Scotty. You know, we always like to highlight reasons why you would want a player in segment 1 before, talking about reasons why he might not be a great fit in segment 2, and that's where we're at now. When we talk about reasons why Peterka might actually not be a great fit, what stands out to you?
We talked about it a little bit off air before we hit record here. You're not getting a impact player on the defensive side of the puck. He's not going to help you on the PK. He's not even going to grade out very well, defensively at 5-on-5. Not going to help you in the faceoff circle. And for a fan base that is really asking pretty consistently. I mean, we talked about this on Friday. Like everyone wants, physicality and wants a little bit of, this guy's gonna have a chip on his shoulder, gonna lay out the body and or whatever, and that is very much not Peterka. He's not gonna improve your team in the physicality department. There, I think you called him a skills player, which is kind of the way to identify somebody like that. So yeah, like you are getting him to produce points, and that is something that this team also needs. Like
in the top 6, especially.
Right. We talk about that a lot. Like there's more than just one need for this team. There's a handful of things that this team currently needs, and he would just help you a lot on the offensive side of the puck. He'd help you a lot in the offensive zone. Probably wouldn't be too much of an impact player elsewhere. But as you mentioned in segment 1, you can also put him on the power play, help some of your special teams as well. He definitely fills a role, just not, like with Marner, it's like, oh, he does everything, right? Like that's obviously right. That's why he's Marner and why he's going to get 10 plus mil a year. So this is definitely an offensive skilled player for sure.
Yeah, he is, according to his evolving hockey player card. Again, however much stock you want to put into these player cards, that's, do that. But I like to use it as supplemental content on top of what we're talking about. And according to his evolving hockey player card, he is a 2 percentile on defense and a 96 percentile on offense. So it's one of those situations where his scoring is so good it kind of outweighs the poor defense. His overall is 82 when you combine those two factors. But you have to understand you're getting a skills-based forward who is solely focused on scoring goals. And that's something this team needs. They need to be able to score more goals, but they also desperately need to get tougher to play against. They also need to get better defensively. They need to get better on the penalty kill, and he does not provide any of that. Despite being, 6'1", I think a little over 200 pounds, he does not. I'm sorry, he's actually only 190, a little bit of a string bean for his height. Despite that, he only had 40 hits this last season.
30, yeah.
Yeah, he's not a very physical player. So there are definitive cons to bringing him here. Like, don't get me wrong, the offense he provides could really outweigh any downside he may provide. Really, I think where you could really get tougher to play against is in the bottom 6, because last year your bottom 6 didn't provide any offense and they weren't really tough to play against. I think that's really where the Red Wings should focus on getting tougher to play against, is in the bottom 6. But he does not. He played 1 minute on the penalty kill this last year, and that was probably just a shift change at the end of the power play. You know what I'm talking about? Like, okay, the penalty kill's about to end. Here's the guy. Get out there for your even strength shift, and there's like a couple seconds off, and it accumulated over the course of a season to 1 minute of penalty kill time for JJ Peterka. So I'm not. This is not a guy that you would bring in if your sole goal is to get tougher to play against. In my opinion, I still think just because of the age, the scoring that this team still needs, because this team needs everything. We need to get tougher to play against, and I think that is the most important thing right now. But also, we need better top 6 scoring, because we don't have a top 6 winger for that top line right now. It's just Raymond Larkin in a cycle. We need another 2 top 4 defensemen. You just need everything. So you don't pass up on a guy like Peterka if he's there at a reasonable cost. And I think that's the other thing that might have people hesitating, because guys like Peterka won't come cheap. At least a competent general manager would not let him come cheap. And we've talked about Buffalo Sabres before, right? With Dylan Cousins. The Sabres wanted a NHL ready now player to come into their lineup. And do you have what the Sabres are going to want for JJ Peterka? Because Scotty, in your mind, what do you think they're going to want for a guy like JJ Peterka?
A lot.
Right.
A lot. I think it's going to be a pretty high price tag, man. And the thing with the Wings that is so fascinating in trade talks is they have the ability to kind of provide whatever a team is looking for, in the sense of if you're looking for draft picks, like hopefully the Wings keep getting better and they're not super high draft picks, but like the Wings have plenty of draft picks available to move. If you're looking for, NHL prospects that are still maybe a year or two away and are kind of lower in the system because you're a part of a long rebuild and you're just going for highest ceiling, the Wings have plenty of that. Or if you're going for like young NHL player, has only played maybe half a season or a season, or is like on the flip side of that, on the cusp of making the NHL, right? Like right on that kind of border and maybe will debut this upcoming season, or for a worse team would absolutely debut this season. Like they have all of those things. So I think it's interesting for a team like Buffalo who had, they kind of, I don't know if broke out is the right term, but like last year, not this past year, 2 seasons ago, had a really high scoring offense and were playing pretty competitive hockey. They were, in the playoff race down to the last couple of days of the regular season. And then this year, I think that they weren't terrible by any stretch, but like that kind of glass cannon philosophy of like, we're just going to outscore all of our problems kind of caught up with them. So it's interesting when they look at their team and they go, okay, we're going to get rid of a young player that produces offense. It's like, okay, well, does that mean they want more defensively sound players? Because again, if there's any organization in hockey that has draft or NHL prospects that are, two-way or defensive-minded, etc., it is the Detroit Red Wings. That is all Yzerman really wants to draft and all he has drafted as far as forwards over the last couple of years. So I would imagine, to finally get to your question, it's going to take a couple of, as my dad used to say, a couple few of those. Like I think you're going to have multiple assets, multiple young assets that are sound defensively but also have decent offensive upside going forward. Now, I think the Wings have a couple of guys they're probably just like, we're not trading them. But I think that Buffalo's going to want probably some picks and some young players or some prospects that could blossom into solid two-way players.
Right, because they don't want to tear down. They're looking to swap pieces.
They also don't
essentially
really need defensemen. Like,
right.
Like they could use defensive depth, obviously, but like
good defensive depth, but we also don't have that. So
right, yeah, that's the one thing.
That's the one thing we can't provide.
But like that, you know what I mean? Though, like they have like their big name. Okay, this is a point-producing offensive defenseman. Like they have a handful of those. They have even more than just the two big names. So like, I would imagine they're either going to want blue line depth of defensive-minded defensemen who we don't really have anything that's going to line up there. Unless you want to give up like Edvinsson, which I don't think the Red Wings are going to do. And so that brings me back to, the forwards.
Well, I mean, like, look at, again, I'm going to keep referencing the Dylan Cousins trade. Like, they had to deal, was it Josh Norris to the Buffalo Sabres for Dylan Cousins. They had to do a swap of close to equitable players, right? 2 players that are kind of similar. And do you have a top 6 young winger you don't want to keep around? Like, I think they're probably going to be asking for guys like NHL ready Marco Kasper. Probably is somebody they're going to ask for. That's a non-starter for me. Marco Kasper is a center. He provides more value long term. You might be able to get away offering them Danielson, because you could argue he's only like maybe a season. He could, maybe if he has a breakout, can't be on the team this year. But I think that I know there's going to be a lot of Red Wings fans who are going to be uncomfortable with that. Like, you have to understand that you're not going to be able to just walk up to them and be like, Elmer Soderblom, Jonathan Berggren, and Albert Johansson, and they'll say yes. Like, it's not the NHL value meter. Like, those guys aren't going to equal what you're going to be getting in return in JJ Peterka, so why would they take that, right? And there's even still Red Wings fans who would say no to that because, what if Elmer Soderblom becomes Peterka? It could be anything. It could be a boat. So it's like they're going to ask for something you don't want to give up, and you're going to have to be okay being uncomfortable, at least initially, to get a guy of that caliber if that's the route you want to go. Like, this is a established player who is young, has proven that he's worth the contract, at least in my eyes. Like, yeah, they're going to be asking for a lot. And I don't know. You said they have a lot they could offer, and they do, like in draft picks and prospects, but I don't know if they have anyone on this roster right now. Like, they're not going to want Tarasenko. He's old. He's over the hill. They're not going to want Andrew Kopp. They're not going to want GT Comfer. They want somebody of
Correct.
equal value. They want basically what they already have, but what they already have doesn't want to be there anymore, allegedly, reportedly. So it's like, do you have a JJ Peterka substitute that you can offer them? The Senators did. They had Josh Norris, and they were able to give that for Dylan Cousins. But do the Red Wings? That's I'm not confident that they do personally. So I'm not confident that this deal happens unless the Sabres admit to themselves, like, this core is not working and we got to start over for the fourth time this decade.
Right.
But, like,
or right again, and that, or you're willing to get rid of Casper /
and I'm not.
Danielson / I was gonna say Raymond, but that's ridiculous. He's far surpassed that.
Oh
at
yeah,
this point.
Raymond's
so like
far
a year
superior.
ago, maybe that's a different conversation. But yeah, like it is. That's really what it comes down to, and I'm not sure too much the fan base is gonna be.
And you have to understand they're retaining Kevin Adams as their general manager, and he's got to be feeling the pressure to make this core work. If he rebuilds, that's him admitting to ownership that I failed. So he's not going to want, like, you can't offer him the 13th overall pick and a bunch of draft prospects,
They're
player
also
prospects.
not like, not to like be a Sabres defender, but they're not like 20 points out of the playoffs either. Like, they barely missed 2 seasons ago, and then this past season fell back down to earth a little bit, but still were 79, 80 points. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like they're like they have good young talent, so I would imagine that they are trying to make it work with this core for sure.
Yeah, and there are a couple other elements to this that could shape or warp his value. So let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll talk about that too. So segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings coming up. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. I want to shout out Winged Wheel Podcast because I did listen to their conversation about Peterka over the weekend, and they brought up one really good point that I hadn't thought of. I think a lot of Red Wings fans are kind of in the same headspace with the Peterka thing, but they've brought up the fact that he is a German national as a reason why he may want to come here because of the fact that the Red Wings have Moritz Seider. Now, I don't know if that's enough of a reason for him to be like, I want to go there, but it was a really salient point, I thought, because of the fact that, thank you, there's only a select few Germans in the NHL that are of note, as at least off the top of my head that I can think of. It's Moritz Seider, Leon Draisaitl, and Tim Stützle. So for a guy like Peterka, maybe there is a little bit of a want to go to a team like Detroit or Ottawa even that's up and coming, that is young. So like it presumably when you'll start winning will be when you're in your prime as well, but also has somebody locked up long term. Again, Stützle, Draisaitl, Seider, all these 3 teams have that one thing in common. I mean, obviously Edmonton's a Stanley Cup contender right now. They're in their window. But I wonder if that may shape his desire on what team to go to. Because, again, he's an RFA. It's not like he has a ton of power. But we've seen RFAs kind of dictate their landing spots before with like Alex DeBrincat, right? When you're an RFA, you can get traded anywhere, but you can simply say, I'm not going to sign with that team. And then, well, your value is gone. That team's not going to want to trade for you if you tell them I'm not signing with you. So you do have some power to control where you go by just telling the team that currently has you, these are the teams that I'm willing to sign long-term with. And that also really hurts your trade value. So it might warp the ability of Yzerman if Detroit's on that list for, let's go with the hypothetical theory, right? That he does care about that. Because there's not Germans in every market. It's not like Swedes, Russians, Canadians, Americans. There's only a select few Germans in the NHL. Let's say that does matter to him. Well, his value is basically diminished because you've shrunk the pool from 31 teams to 3. So I do think that that's an interesting anecdote that they brought up, and I thought it was worth bringing up here too.
Yeah. I think it's definitely something that's interesting to think about. I don't think that is going to play a factor in this. Like, I would be shocked if they were like, hey, his list is 3 teams because he wants to play with one other German player. Like that seems very niche. I think it's more of just like, can maybe like sprinkle on top to an idea. Like if he's already like, like I really like Detroit, maybe it's Detroit or somebody else. And he's kind of like weighing the pros and cons. Certainly that's something that probably wouldn't hurt, but I have a hard time believing that's going to be like, hey, this is his number one factor, or like this is going to be the sole reason why he ends up somewhere. I think that it's probably more of like icing rather than, the whole cake.
I think that's pretty much it too. I agree with you that it would be the cherry on top for him. Like if he's considering like 10 or 12 teams that he'd be willing to extend with, maybe if this team has a German player on it, then okay, I put them just above the other team, right? It would be that cherry on top. I agree that
maybe like,
yeah. Again, we're all theorizing about something that may not even be a factor.
Solid chance he doesn't care about that actually at all. So
right. I just thought it was really interesting because I was like, yeah, there is not a lot of Germans in the league, so it could matter to him.
Worth bringing up, I think, for sure.
Right. The other thing, Scotty, we've been talking about trading for this RFA, but we just did a whole episode the other day about offer sheets, and I did see a report on social media that there are quite a few teams that are gearing up to offer sheet JJ Peterka. So I do think that is worth talking about, at least briefly here at the end of the show, too, is are you willing to offer sheet in an attempt to get him, keeping in mind that, again, with offer sheets, you're probably overpaying for that player because you don't want the other team to accept the deal.
Right. Yeah, we kind of had a relatively long conversation in regards to like the whole offer sheet status of like the current NHL and whatnot. I think, I mean, sure. Like, sure. I'm not really sure there's a ton of downside unless you're paying him, 15 AAV. Like, I'm not really sure there's too much of a downside, but Buffalo is not going to let him walk for nothing either. Like, I feel like they're going to match most offers and make sure they retain him so that they can trade him for assets and not lose a 23-year-old that just pushed 70 points for absolutely nothing. Yes, you can try to just like be an a-hole and just be like, hey, we're going to try to overpay him and see if Buffalo will let a guy that they know they're not going to likely retain anyway walk for nothing. But at the same time, he's 23. If it's a long-term deal, that's what other teams are going to want to extend him for anyways. The cap is going up. All of these factors, I really don't expect this to be too much of a factor in his sweepstakes.
Right, and what's funny is because I think I'd be more willing to attain him through offer sheet than give up assets through a trade because I'm more willing to give up draft picks than I am players on the roster. So, I think with Peterka, you'd have to offer him somewhere between the $7 million and $9.5 million range, which the return for that is a first-round pick for 2026. Could be next year's draft because the offer sheet window is after the draft. Something we neglected to say last time, or not neglected to say, misunderstood, because at the time of us talking about it, we were close, 2025 draft was still on our minds, but it would be the first-round pick for the 26 draft, the second-round pick, and the third-round pick for the 26 draft, on top of whatever overpay you're giving him, which could go up to 9.3. If you go above that, you're looking at a different return and compensation. But I don't think you would have to offer I don't think it would be advised to go above 9.5. I think that's already too rich, but that's how offer sheeting works. So, I'd be more willing to go that route. In a perfect world, if you could tell me you can attain him one of two ways, through trades with players on your roster or through offer sheet compensation, I'd actually rather go that route because I'd rather give up the picks at this point in the rebuild than, prospects we already have and guys who are on the roster. Because, again, you're not trading comp. They would ask for a Marco Casper, and I'm not willing to give him up. So I think in a perfect world, I'd actually rather go the offer sheet compensation route. But because of everything that you stated, I don't think that's going to happen. Because I think even going up as to 9.3 with the rising cap, Buffalo probably matches that. And in a worst-case scenario, okay, we just have this guy long-term now. We didn't want to trade him in the first place. It was him who wanted to be dealt. And then at the same time, now you have his contract sorted out, and that makes trading him easier because of the fact that you now have him locked up long-term. It actually probably increases his value for Buffalo because he's locked up long-term. You don't have that question mark.
As long as it's not an egregious overpay, then yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I thought that was worth bringing up too because I had heard that there were teams. Again, it was a report that teams, anonymous teams, were gearing up to offer sheet. So who knows how much of it is just smoke and mirrors? But he's eligible to be offer sheeted. So I thought it was worth commenting on. Scotty, any final thoughts?
We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow. Stay tuned. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.